Now, for decades, Europe has been abolishing passport controls and bringing in policies so people, goods and capital can move more freely. But after the Paris attacks, all that could change. Some European leaders want the so-called Schengen agreement to be reconsidered, and EU interior ministers are meeting in Brussels to discuss ways to boost measures and crack down on the right to movement. But among those likely to be affected are the thousands of refugees who are trying to relocate to Europe. The passport-free Schengen area is made up of 26 countries through which EU citizens and non-EU and non-Europeans can both travel as if in one bloc. But France's Prime Minister says that without better external border controls, the future of the Schengen zone is in danger. The ministers' meeting will seek to strengthen restrictions on semi-automatic weapons and ammunition, along with a common standard for tracing weapons. They're also pushing for a common database for airline passengers. Previous proposals were rejected over privacy concerns. Another main focus is to tighten passport controls on Europeans entering the EU. Currently, their passports are checked visually, but not against a computer record. A major push will be made to increase the sharing of intelligence. France says it was never informed that the alleged ringleader of the Paris attacks had entered the EU. Well, for more on this, let's cross to Brussels and speak to Kevin Ozebek. Kevin, there are a number of initiatives France is hoping the EU interior ministers want to adopt.
That's absolutely correct. And the French delegation today is going to be pushing very hard for increased security along the EU's external border. The French authorities say that, of course, it's given that all EU citizens who leave the EU and then return do need their passport checked. But they also say there are many border crossings where security is quite lax and documents are not checked, specifically the Turkish-Greek border. So they want to make sure all people who are entering Greece into the European Union have their documents fully checked. And as you mentioned, they also want them cross-checked against the database. The French Interior Minister also really will be pushing hard today to adopt that passenger airline database. This has been debated for years here in Brussels, but has never been able to get off the ground because there have been critics of this proposal saying it infringes on people's personal rights. Well, now France is pushing so hard for this because France is saying this will allow intelligence agencies to see who is flying into the EU when, and at least this will give intelligence agencies a 48-hour heads up on who is flying into the EU.
And Kevin, is there any talk about altering the Schengen agreement? And of course, this agreement allows EU citizens to travel freely to most EU states.
Well, of course, some members of the European public have been very critical of Schengen ever since the Paris attacks last week. But the general consensus among EU leaders is that Schengen has to stay. That is one of the most important pan-European agreements and an agreement that really holds the EU together. EU officials and many interior ministers are saying that Schengen was not the problem and not the cause for the Paris attacks. They want to make sure Schengen stays intact to prevent the stop of free trade and commerce in the Eurozone. Instead, many of the supporters of Schengen are saying the real problem here are the EU's external borders. They want to secure those up to make sure that anyone who leaves Europe for Syria and then returns is very closely tracked.
Okay, Kevin Ozebek, thank you.